right. Thank you for being here today.
Absolutely.
It means a lot to us. Promise Boys was one of my favorite books that I listened to last year. So being able to sit with you today is really special.
Yeah, dope. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Of course. You juggle so many different hats, which I didn't know until I was preparing for today.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, how do you balance being a multi-hyphenate
Yeah.
artpreneur?
Yeah. Well, I like to think that everything I do like feeds into the other, you know what I'm saying, the next thing. So if I'm feeling tapped out on, writing prose, then I'll go do some music, and then that'll like refill my like creative tank, I like to say, you know what I mean? But it's just, for me, it's just about two things. It's one about like being organized, and two is like never procrastinating. Like
Never.
I'm the total opposite of procrastination. Like to the point, like when it's time to do something, I just do it. To the point, I mean, sometimes I make mistakes, you know what I'm saying, because of it, or sometimes I move too fast or I'm moving too quick. But it's just how my brain works. Like if there's an idea or anything hits my head, then I'm just kind of at it.
Yeah.
But that helps me a lot. It just really does. It helps me like the things that I'm able to accomplish in a day. You know what I mean? And like the list goes, like it's a long list of things I can complete just because I'm just
right.
So that's pretty much it. Just just working hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes overworking. But again, like for me, doing the different things helps like feel, it keeps me creative in all the aspects. Yeah.
So would you say that you love all of the things that you do equally, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love creating music. Like I think that's the most fun for like by far. That's the most fun. I love like writing books because it allows me to like get into this really like tranquil kind of flow state where thoughts are able to just flow. Like I'm able to kind of free write, and I really enjoy that. It's like therapeutic. But the process is a long process. It's can be a tedious process. Whereas like with script writing, it's more technical. You know what I mean? You gotta hit your marks, so to speak, like in shorter amounts of time. But it's a quicker process. So it's like everything has its pro, its con. Music is interesting because like the other thing about books is like there's such a clear path to like be an author. I guess you could say that for a lot of these. It's like, okay, just make the art. But when I first started writing books, like the process from writing the book to like getting it on shelves was like, seamless almost. Whereas like with music, at least at the level that I did, right? Yeah. With music, and TV especially, it's like way different. There's so many hoops, so many hurdles, so many people. And so I also really like that about books. It's like, it's a smaller team. And it's like, if they say, hey, we want to put this book out, the book's going to come out. Right. Whereas like in music and TV and film, that's not the case. Like you can be stuck in development on a show, or you can get, whatever the case may be, the thing that you're trying to create may not happen.
Yeah.
And I've had the opposite experience with books. So let's hope that continues.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't see it not continuing, but I don't know. Yeah. But I'm curious, how did you start writing? Because I know that music and film has been something that's been a part of your life for a while, right? But writing is a little bit newer in the sense of like being published.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a long story. I actually wrote my first book. It was a children's picture book, and I want to say 2014.
Okay.
And
it's about 10 years ago.
About 10 years ago. Was it 2014? Yeah, around 2014. Maybe even a little, maybe 2013. But anyway, I was teaching. I was teaching kindergarten in first grade at an elementary school in DC, where I'm from. And I quickly noticed that like none of the books had characters of color. None of the books talked about our community. And they were like easy books to write. It was like See the Dog Run, stuff like that. So just me naturally just trying to, again, I always kind of had like a hustler kind of drive. I'm like, yo, I think I could write these books. And instead of ordering from Scholastic or whoever we're ordering from, they could get the books from me. Right. Which at the time, if I would have told that to any one of the other teachers, probably would have sounded ridiculous. Right. They would have been like, that doesn't, all right, whatever. So literally that year, I started writing books, and I would find pictures online to match the words that I was writing. Okay. And I was using words like prepared, attentive, thought, like these path words that my charter school was like accustomed to using. And my students started to use that vocabulary at 5 and 6. And so they was like, Mr. Brooks, like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Right.
And so I just showed the principal the book I was reading. I was like, yo, these are the books I've been writing, and been showing the kids. And before I knew it, the Charter Network had like gave me, that was kind of my first publishing deal. They gave me money to get the books illustrated, and
cool.
and then I self-published a children's book series. And before I knew it, it was being used at like my entire Charter Network and at schools in Texas, schools in Alabama, schools all over the country.
Okay.
So that was like my first kind of like dipping my toe into being an author. Fast forward, and of course, all of this time I'm also making music. I've been making music since I was like 15.
Okay.
And then fast forward to I saw a movie called Fruitvale Station. This guy Ryan Coogler, who everybody knows now. But at the time I saw the movie, again, I just kind of fell in love with it. Had to see who this guy was, who made this movie. Saw it was Ryan, and something about him connected with me and made me feel like I could be a film director too. You know what I mean? Because I had grown up loving movies. I just never imagined that I could make them. You know?
I mean, that's the purpose of representation.
100%, right? Exactly. So I took that, and then I was like, well, maybe film is something because at the time I was still working in education, and the children's books were cool, but it just wasn't like kind of like scratching that itch, you know?
Yeah.
And so I made my first short film, and then started my journey into filmmaking, and that was in 2016. Okay. I think I made my first film in 2016. Okay. Right, so you had 2014 writing my first books, 2016 making my first short film.
Did you feel like it was scratching that itch that you described making the film?
I did. It had to fire on so many like creative cylinders. You know what I mean? From the writing to the directing to the producing. It was just so much. It required so much creativity, so much vision, that it felt like, okay, I'm doing something. I don't know. I just like, even with the things I get. So as a kid, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which, take that for what it's worth. It doesn't, I feel like it doesn't really necessarily mean anything for me personally and how it's affected my life. I know other people it affects differently. Yeah. But I will say I've always been like, I'm just like on go. So making that first movie, it gave me that drive. And so I really love that. And so that's 2014, 2016. And then, so I applied to film school, the same school that Ryan went to, USC. Started in 2017. Okay. Got in with that film that I made.
So things are moving fast.
They're moving fast. Yeah, which also let me know I'm on the right path. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, because it was happening kind of easy. Like the first film I made did really well. You know what I mean? It was like in Forbes 30 under 30 and got me into this high profile film school and got me a full scholarship from George Lucas. Like all of this, and this was the first film I ever made. Right. And so I was like, okay, cool, there's something here. So I went to SC 2017, graduated in 2020. So circling back to your question of like, how did this come about getting into writing? In 2020, when everything shut down, the world shut down, and I was stuck in my living room trying to figure out, I just spent the last 3 years of my, I just made this big pivot from education to trying to be a filmmaker. Now what, right? Hollywood is shut down, everything's done. So I couldn't make a movie, so I kind of was like, well, let me just return to the things I know, which was creating music and writing books. And so that's kind of what started that. And it's a long chain of events, but eventually I got to a book agent and kind of the rest is history. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that you said that stick out to me. And but what does stick out to me the most is this idea of like when you are on the right path, things tend to open up very quickly. Yeah. And it seems like that's very true for you in the sense of like it was one thing after the other and all you were doing was kind of putting in an effort and creating the thing.
Yeah. That's all I was doing, and I always tell people I don't have no film background. I didn't have a writing background. I didn't study English. I didn't study literature. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like I literally just did the thing. I was like, I like doing this. I like telling stories. I've always loved telling stories. What I will say is my background in music, I think, helped tremendously. For sure. You know what I'm saying? Just because the idea of putting words together to create a thought.
It's natural for you.
You know what I'm saying? And also storytelling. Like my favorite artists, I always connected to the artists that were storytellers. Whether it was, DMX was probably one of my top favorite rappers ever. His first album is Dark and Hell is Hot. It's my number one album of all time. Or the Lupes or the Jay-Z's or the Kendricks, these are all storytellers, Nas. And so, it was something that I like to credit hip hop because I think sometimes a lot of people, I've even heard, I've been around other authors and heard them say like, yo, we could tell kids like, you don't need to be a rapper. You don't need to be a rapper, which I get like in theory, but I think there's something about art and how we consume it in our communities and how hip hop is a entryway to like all of these different things. And so if rap is the, you know what I'm saying, kind of like the gateway drug, then I think let it be that. But anyway, yeah.
I mean, I think music gives language to things that we maybe don't have language to in our world, right? Yeah. Hearing someone describe their pain or a situation that they went through, if it resonates with you, why not try to incorporate that into your life and how you view the world? Yeah. You know, just because the medium is rap doesn't mean that it's any less artful.
That's what I agree. And I wish more people saw it that way.
Same, you know, and hopefully something happens that they do.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
But in hearing that you are so open with like not having a background in film or, you know, having an MFA or a writer, do you ever face doubts or any sort of like criticism for not having that kind of educational background for those things?
Definitely doubts. I mean, now I'm blessed that I do have my MFA from the #1 film school. So it's like, I wouldn't get the criticism there, you know. Yeah. But I definitely have doubts a lot of times, and people talk about it constantly, imposter syndrome, and it's a real thing. And I think it's interesting because for me it's about like the education. For me, it's less about the education, to be honest, and sometimes it's more about me just being black. You know what I'm saying? Just being black in a space that's predominantly white. You know, like the education is cool, but I think I realized you don't need the education to do the great things. You know what I'm saying? Like, but there's something about being, and I'm from a black city. I'm from DC, and so there's this interesting dynamic I've been like having to like struggle with because I'm doing a lot of unlearning and a lot of like relearning and a lot of new learning, but like coming out of an environment like that and kind of going out into the world and being in industries or companies or whatever that's run by all white people.
Right.
There's this push and pull of me sometimes feeling like I could feel like I'm not being heard, or I could feel like basically I'm already assuming there's going to be some level of cultural like incompetency on the part of my counterparts, right? And so,
or judgment,
or there's gonna be something. They're not gonna understand me. They're not gonna get me. And I think that it's just really interesting because now I got my own kids, I got my own daughters, and I'm thinking about how do I teach them about their place in the world.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I want them to understand who they are and understand their history. And at the same time, I don't want them to have to walk into rooms and automatically assume that they're going to be discriminated against. Because you know what I mean? Like it's a fun. But anyway, so that's where my kind of imposter syndrome comes from a little bit, is me feeling like, okay, I'm walking into these spaces where these people are not going to respect me. They're not going to, you know, but in a lot of ways, I'm putting all of that on myself. You know what I'm saying? And so
that's a delicate line, I would say.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, so many people, including myself, have experienced that in many ways, right? Based off of appearance and, you know, how you choose to show up in the world. Yeah. Some people celebrate that and some people don't, right? Yeah. I think sometimes as Black people, we think if we get as much education as possible, that'll validate us, and then we'll be instantly accepted into wherever space we're trying to be accepted into.
Yeah, it's tough, and that's kind of going the other way. You know, it's like because I don't think that's necessarily true either. So yeah, it's a fine line. But anyway, but to your question though, of me feeling any type of criticism or any doubt, that's kind of where it comes from a little bit. And but criticism not so much. Like I haven't faced any criticism really yet. I'm sure it'll come. You know what I'm saying? As my career blossoms right now, nobody know who I am for real. So
are you sure?
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like the people who do, they rock with me, luckily.
Right.
So but of course as that starts to, you know how it is. As that starts to grow, I'm sure there will be times where I might be faced with criticism, man. Just take it as it comes.
Yeah. What has your unlearning process and what you've been talking about, what has that looked like for you? How do you kind of ground yourself in your identity and your capabilities while, you know, with everything that you do?
You know, try to like, I pray, you know, meditate, try to surround myself with people who love me as much as I can. Try to surround myself with people I trust. And try to read, try to learn, you know, try to like literally just learn. Like, I can't be the first person who's gone through this. Right. You know what I'm saying? Which is why books are so important, because there's all of these like tips and tricks and knowledge and wisdom. So just trying to figure out what I can learn from watching interviews, like watching other people speak about this and just try to see what I can learn. I think the first step too is just like being aware, you know what I mean? Just being aware, like this is happening to me. And then that kind of helps me sometimes check myself in the moment. You know what I'm saying? Where I feel like I'm doing that to myself. Like, whoa, let me take a step back and have a reason to feel this way first before I go into a situation feeling like, oh, I'm not going to be heard in this situation. You know, like let me, you know what I'm saying? Just step into it and take it for what it's worth. Try to take it, you know, try to take things a day at a time is another thing, because I'm constantly thinking about the future.
I feel
you know what I mean? So just trying to like, when I feel myself doing that, again, just being aware, just trying to like talk myself down, take some deep breaths. You know what I'm saying?
Recenter, reground.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awareness is so important. I think it's the first step to so many different things, right? And it's also a space for you to reflect in that moment, but also a way to stay present in the moment as well, to what is actually happening instead of maybe an experience that you've had prior to that moment.
No, I agree. Being aware is to be alive, as they say.
For sure. For sure. I mean, so much of what we're talking about is also represented in Promise Boys. And I was wondering for you, as you were writing it and talking about racism and systemic racism and all of the different themes that are painful, I would say, and a painful experience of Black people in this world, was it difficult for you mentally to be tackling so many themes? How did you take care of yourself and your own experiences while writing these experiences?
I wouldn't say it was difficult. I mean, it was more therapeutic than anything. Me being like one of those students at one time, me teaching those students. Before I was a formal classroom teacher, I taught character development to at-risk Black boys in middle and high school. And so a lot of the things in Promise were pulled from like my experience as either pushing teacher doing like career readiness or a classroom teacher, or even my experience as a teenager growing up in the same city. So a lot of it was, I love that stuff. A lot of it's therapeutic. It feels good. These are stories that like I feel like need to be told. I'm like reliving the moments as I'm putting them on paper. So it feels good, you know? And I think just doing that work actually does help me protect my experiences, because it helps me think through them. If there was any like trauma I held from any of those moments, it helps me work through that. A great example is actually like one of the relationships in the book. Trey and his Uncle T, you know, was a little bit structured around my relationship with my stepfather. And it was so interesting because I got to a point in the book, I didn't want Uncle T to just be bad, you know? And so
he was very nuanced, I would say.
He was very nuanced, right? So you get to a point in the book where he's like, you know, I just want what's best for you. And that's one of the whole big things, right? Is that like, and themes, let me make sure that was one of the big themes, is that like the way we like rear our Black boys is in a way that's, we think is to protect them. We think it's to send them out into the world ready to tackle anything, but we're kind of like cutting their legs from under them before they even have a chance to like develop.
Grow,
you know what I'm saying?
You know, into who their identity is.
Exactly. And so we're actually crippling them, you know what I'm saying, more than we're helping. But to that point, when I was like, even that experience, it helped me realize a lot about my own relationship with my stuff. I was like, okay, that's what he was doing what he thought he needed to do. You know what I'm saying? So like, in a lot of those ways, talking about all the experiences, from the relationships to the way the boys are treated in school to what have you, a lot of those things were things that I got to work through myself. So, it was actually like therapeutic.
Yeah, I've heard that before from different authors that maybe sometimes are able to maybe even rewrite an experience that they had with someone that they cared about that maybe didn't go so well. They're able to kind of have this idealized experience with them, and that is something that helps them in their journey. And for you, it seems like you were able to humanize with your stepfather, right, through this experience.
No, you're totally right.
I mean, as a parent, right, what is it like to know that, or how do you see yourself now, having written Promise Boys and who you are now as a parent and your daughters? You know, how do you want them to show up in the world?
That's a great question. I mean, I want them to have all the confidence in the world. I want them to feel like they have purpose. I'd say those are the two big things. Like the two, I want them to be good people, like, but I feel like confidence and purpose are like two of the biggest things. Like, and I don't know why, but it's just the confidence piece, I think, will allow them to be leaders, to like kind of forge their own path. But again, what is that path? Which is where I think purpose comes in. And I think a lot about like what drives me. I think about maybe friends that I've had in the past, or maybe even friends I still have, and how maybe they haven't found their purpose, and what that can do to like your growth, development, drive. All of these things I think come really from like having a sense of like purpose. And again, confidence. I feel like if they're confident, then they'll always feel like they belong. They won't. I don't know. It's just something about them being confident Black women that will, like, I think help shape, what I'm saying, the way they navigate things. But so for me as a dad, like that's kind of what I think about. It's like how can they grow up in that,
Is that something that you took away from writing Promise Boys, of just being able to be like, okay, you wrote so many different of these characters that were a part of these boys' lives that made decisions that were not so great and that were questionable, right? Has that shaped you as a parent at all?
It has, and like specific to Promise Boys, but also just specific to like writing in general. Like with the characters that I write, I always want them to have an arc, right? Like a character arc. And a lot of times when I'm thinking through characters and like who they are, I come down to a couple questions. Two of them being, what do they want? And then the other being, what do they need? And a lot of times that question about like what do they need is the really important question. That's the question that helps inform their arc, right? And the what do they want is more can really inform the plot. Like where in Promise Boys we know what they want. They want their innocence, but what do they need? And so when I think about that question, it always kind of brings me back to purpose. And so literally as I'm thinking through these fictional people, I'm like, okay, for my daughters, I want to make sure that they know the things that they need because they understand their purpose. Because if you don't understand your purpose, then you'll be maybe a little aimless, right? Like you don't know what you need.
For sure.
And so I came back to that a lot. Okay, like what do these boys need? Well, what's their purpose? What is the thing that they want to do in the world? And so like you look at Ramon, he wants to open his restaurant. He wants to take care of his grandmother and take care of his family. And this and with him is was different because he understood that that's what he wanted to do, but how he got there he didn't quite know. And so so it's like things like that, just making sure that the characters understand, like, well, really not even the characters, but the reader understands, like, okay, what does this character need? And by the end of the book, we solve that question for the character. And then so for my daughters, thinking about how do I give them that up front so they don't, you know what I mean?
Have to go through.
Exactly. Go through the turmoil of a murder mystery. You know what I'm saying? To figure out the thing that they need.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so much of what you're talking about, purpose, is something that I'm sure everyone thinks about, and including myself, right? What has your journey towards discovering your purpose and walking in it looked like?
That's another great question. I mean, it's definitely a journey, I'm still thinking through it, I mean, at one point I was thinking about my purpose as educating kids, and that's why I literally started writing those children's books, is because I saw
you saw a need.
I saw a need, and I said, okay, here's where I can give my life purpose. And I started to think about like my journey and how I've gone on to different things and what I'm doing. I'm telling stories and I'm trying to be inspirational to kids who look like me and kids all over who maybe don't look like me. And I keep coming around to this idea of like revolution and like what would it mean? I mean, for me, it's like I want to change my community. You know, that's just what's always been in my heart.
Yeah.
And so, which is a really like one of those big like lofty kind of.
It's a big statement.
It's a big statement, right? So I'm thinking about, okay, well, let me take a step back from that and like, what is my place in changing my community look like, and like, how can I give myself purpose? And so I think for me, like we were talking about earlier, as I'm doing different things and certain things are coming easier, it's helping to like guide me and kind of like gut check what my purpose might be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So at this point, it's like, okay, like I feel like, okay, I am meant here to tell stories, to be inspirational, and to take the things that I see in my community that I want to, like these problems and things that I want to solve, I can put them in a book and talk about my own ideas about how to solve them. You know what I mean? And hopefully that goes out and affects change in a real way. Yeah. So that's kind of been my process and what I've been thinking through. Yeah.
I think what you mentioned about kind of finding how you can answer that big question is what we all, I hope, are striving for, right? And it sounds like you were able to take a big question and then break it down into smaller steps to hopefully impact big change as time continues.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are still in the same space of motivation that you were before getting to where you are right now, right? Do you think your motivation has shifted at all? And, you know, how do you remind yourself to kind of keep going?
Yeah, I think I'm more motivated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm more motivated because I know it's possible now. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you like trying to get to what do they say, reach for the stars or something. You know, if you get to the moon, it just feels like I'm even more motivated. If I really want to get to the stars, like now I feel like it actually is possible. Whereas before I was just like,
it would be nice.
You know what I'm saying? Telling myself that to keep myself going, right? Like you got to tell yourself certain things to keep yourself going. But then once these things start to fall in place, things that you dreamed about 10 years ago, it's like, oh, nah, this could really happen. So it just makes me even more motivated. I got a lot more to lose now. And then now I got kids too. So that always...
It's another layer.
You know what I'm saying? That always, if you need a little bit of extra motivation, just have some kids. But yeah, so I would say I'm more motivated. And I just, you know, I'm more excited than ever. Like just excited about what's possible and what can come just now that I've seen like, oh, like things can really happen. You know what I'm saying? Like the things that, again, that you dream about can really happen. And now that I know that, it makes me look at the world and life totally different. Now I look at it. Now I really do look at it like I can do anything.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, which is crazy empowering. It's like I could literally do anything. Like, so not in the most humble way, but it's like it's just the idea of like, okay,
the
you
sky
set a
really
goal.
Does feel like the limit.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes you like much more hungry, in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it, you know, like you mentioned, in doing things that felt impossible to you prior, right? And now having it be a reality for you, it seems like in your space of reflection, it's given you the space to continue to want more and to dream more and to feel capable.
No, it definitely has. So it's time, you know, just keep going. I just try to, like my family, just keep going, you know what I'm saying? Stay humble, hard work, and go from there.
What would you say to someone who struggles with having that sort of motivation and maybe things aren't panning out in the ways that they hoped and they're feeling kind of stuck or just kind of what's the point?
That's tough because I understand that space. And I mean, the easy thing to say is like, just keep going. Like that's what everybody said, just keep going.
Right.
Which at the end of the day, that's kind of the bottom line. You keep, you know what I mean? You keep going. But what helps me is just like strategy. You know what I mean? Just really taking a step back and figuring out, getting just super clear, you know? And again, it's a hard question to answer for everybody, but like, if anybody is in that space, what I would maybe say is one step is like, just take stock of everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the actual goal, and how do you work backwards from there to like kind of align to where you are now, and what's the first step you can take? small goals too, I think, like baby steps too. You know what I mean? Versus trying to like take these huge leaps because everybody's trying to compare themselves to the next person.
Exactly.
It's like just baby steps. Because again, to the point of like becoming more motivated, once you start accomplishing those those, I'm not gonna say little goals, but the baby steps, once you start accomplishing those, it fuels you back up because you're like, oh, okay, I can do it, right? So just the smallest thing, even if it's just, you know what, okay, I just want to write a page this week. You know what I'm saying? Whatever it is, just like, what is your goal? And then work backwards from there to like meet yourself where you at.
Yeah.
And just start off small. And I think that will help you, again, start to accomplish things and you'll see progress, right? Yeah. And the other thing that's going to sound, hope is I'm not making a joke when I say this, but like talk to people around you. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you feel like the people around you are no help, then you need to get new people around you. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like you're in the wrong room if you feel like you can't talk to the people that's closer to you and none of it's helping or inspiring you in any way, then I feel like you gotta it's something you're doing, you gotta switch up. Get in new circles, get in new rooms, go look for groups, whatever it is, but just gotta, I feel like if you in that space, like you gotta switch something up.
Yeah. No, for sure, right? And I think in recognizing that maybe the people around you are not the people that will help you to achieve that dream, I think that's where people kind of get stuck. Yeah. Because at the same time, those people are comforting. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you kind of take a step to the side to be able to surround yourself with the people that will help you achieve the things that you want? Yeah.
You got to become uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the thing, is like you can't. And it sounds. I know it's easier said than done, but it's like just what it is. Yeah. If you're around these people because they're confident, then you got to know that you got to be uncomfortable to do, especially like where we come from, to do anything to make it out of that circumstance. You're gonna have to make yourself uncomfortable. Yeah. And so I think whatever it is that you're chasing, you got to want that more than your comfortability at that time. Sure. For
sure. There's so much growth in being uncomfortable. Yeah. I think if anything, you'll learn more about yourself and maybe find strength that you didn't know that you had before.
Yeah, for sure. I've been there, in fact, there's been a lot of points in my journey I could point to where I was made extremely uncomfortable. And oftentimes very lonely. You know what I'm saying? There's been times where because I moved around a lot, I might have been uncomfortable, might have been lonely, but I look at those things now as like blessings. Like I think those things really helped me a lot. You know what I'm saying? So it happens.
It's tough when you're in it, like you said, but once you're able to look back, you're like, okay. Yeah. I did a lot to get to where I'm at. And to me, it seems like you're almost in a space of constant gratitude. How important is that for you?
That's really important. That's really, really important. You got to be. Because like you said, things get hard. Yeah. You know what I mean? Things get hard. And if you're not recognizing that, like, yo, I'm blessed, like, this is crazy, like, look how far I've come, then you'll want to quit, you know? But I try to remain full of gratitude. I try to remain gracious. And it just helps. It helps the journey.
For sure. For sure. Outside of gratitude, where do you find inspiration as someone that is a lover of so many things? Like you love film, you love music, you love books. What feels inspiring to you? What media do you gravitate towards when you are feeling like you need just a little bit of a inspiring moment or a creative moment?
For sure. All of those things. Even podcasts, I feel like I spend a lot of time on YouTube.
Really? You don't hear that much anymore, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I really do. I feel like I spend a lot of time on YouTube, like watching watching interviews. Some of it is like more just drama. Like I might be watching Shannon Sharp or something. But then other times I am watching that thing that inspires me or watching that person that I look up to. Like Donald Glover, we were talking about him off mic. Like, he's been on his whole press run because of his new show, and watching him, watching those things inspire me. But then music, of course, I'm always inspired by music, TV, like you said, all of it. Art, paintings. Like I'm inspired by it all. But it's something about like hearing the people who I really admire, like, and hearing them and their journey and where they're at. It's something about that always just like it picks me up. It's like okay, all right, it's time to go to war, you know.
Right.
So I would say I watch a ton of interviews. Yeah.
I think what you're mentioning is that that isolation that kind of comes in, right?
Yeah.
When we're going through something, you know, we tend to feel like it's only us and like no one understands, right? But then if you're maybe feeling stuck in something and you see someone that you admire talk about something similar, you're like, okay, they were able to do it. Maybe I can as well too, or at least I can try.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, those people, like if you're in a place where you feel stuck and you hear these people who are going on to do these amazing things that you admire talk about times that they felt stuck. Again, it just lets you know, okay, this is what it's gonna feel like. You know what I mean? Like maybe some people's paths are like extremely simple and easy, but for the most part, this is what it's gonna feel like, and it just lets you know not to give up. Which again, I know I will say I used to watch interviews and people would say, yeah, just don't quit, just keep going. And I would hate that so much.
Yeah, like when you're in the thick of it, you're like, I mean, that's cute in theory, but like I'm really in it right now. Like I don't really know if this just keep going is going to help me get out of it, but it does. Like you said, because eventually if you did keep going, you were able to get out of it.
Exactly.
At some point, however getting out of it looked like.
At some point, just keep going. Just keep going,
Something that I cannot get out of my head is how structured you are. And you said that you were diagnosed with ADHD when you were younger. And I'm like, these two are not coinciding to me. You seem very like on schedule. You don't procrastinate. I mean, you do a lot of different things, which I mean, I think most creative people probably have ADHD, if I'm being honest with you.
Well, yeah, because the way I understand it, there's kind of two kinds, right? There's the attention deficit, but then there's the hyperactivity. And so for hyperactivity is where I live.
I feel you.
You know what I mean? And in fact, I never forget when I was when it was suggested that I take medicine, my mom went and got a second opinion, and they told her,
good on mom.
Yeah, no, and she was a nurse, and they told her if it's not affecting his, of course I'm in elementary school, so it ain't really too many grades, but they were like, if it's not really affecting his academics for real, like at this stage, like it's no point to do it.
Yeah.
And it really helped me because when I would go on and I became a teacher, and there were kids who were getting in trouble for needing to walk around the class, or like when kids were getting in trouble for needing to like learn in different ways, I was able to like empathize and be like, well, let's just let them learn in this different way. Like it doesn't mean that they're disabled or you know
or
what
that
I mean?
they need medication.
Yeah, which is another thing in Promise even. You know that I try to like hint at. Just hit that. I don't know if sorry, I think I accidentally kicked the camera. I don't know if it's still good. But
I think it's still good?
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think that conversation is a big one, you know. And I think it's strange that there aren't kind of rules surrounding when children should be on medication, especially like you said, if they just need to learn differently. I think it ends up hurting and impacting people in the long run, right? Because then they feel like they're just constantly not enough, or that the way that they learn is weird, or that they aren't smart enough.
No, it's totally true. And then even going back to when you talked about how structured I am, it goes back to my relationship with my stepfather and Trey and Uncle T, because when he came into the picture, it was very much you need structure. And so that relationship that Uncle T had with Trey was you know what I'm saying? It was, but again, it was like, I guess it helped me. You know what I'm saying? But
during it, you're like, this is terrible.
Yeah, exactly. But now I am so it's and that's all of the things I'm thinking about as an adult. I'm like, that's so interesting, because as a kid, I was like, I really hate this guy. He really hates me. But now I am structured. Like now, you know what I'm saying? Now I have discipline. You know what I'm saying? So it's just interesting. And that's what I wanted to talk about in the book too. Is like when we try to, particularly our young Black boys who are constantly being diagnosed with ADHD or ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, you know, all of these different things is like, are they these things or are they just like Black boys, you know? And so when we have to like beat into them literally like discipline, structure, for me, it worked out.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of boys who are like crushed by that, and the life is it's stripped out of them. You know what I'm saying? Or they become very violent and very aggressive, and you know what I mean. And so it becomes like this cycle.
It doesn't work for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that we see things in absolutes sometimes, especially when it comes to children, unfortunately. Right.
Yeah.
And for you, it was a positive, right? You're like able to kind of create your life around the fact that you can do so many things and also be structured, which like I will say I am jealous of that a little bit. But for some, like, they're not able to maybe be as creative or free thinking under certain rules or guidelines of structure and discipline.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. So what does your, let's say, a routine look like for you in the ways of working and creating and taking care of yourself?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I'll give you two answers. The way it did work, because I just started a new project. So, but the way it did work, I would wake up, first thing I would do was like, well, I would get my daughters up in the morning, get them all together. And then when my wife takes over, I go on a walk, you know what I'm saying, around the neighborhood. Might go on a jog. I'll usually write. Well, I'll get back, eat breakfast. I'll write for like a couple hours. I also like writing spurts. Okay. So like, I'm like, the first part of the day, I maybe could do a couple hours, but then after that, it's like every 30 to 45 minutes, like it's on, off, right? So like, I'll get back home, eat, work for a couple hours, take a break, maybe eat some lunch, and then for the next like couple hours, I'll do the same, right? But it'll be 30 minutes on, 30 to 45 minutes on, and like 15, 20 minutes off, for the remainder of the day. But depending on the project, whatever is like most important, I'll do. That's the thing I'm working on in the morning. You know what I mean? So like, once I get back from that walk, I eat my breakfast. I'm on that for 2 hours. Eat lunch. After lunch, I'm like, it's like all the other things. I kind of just divvy it up. You know what I'm saying? Like. Yeah, I just divvy it up. But that's literally my day. I just started a new gig. I'm actually, for the first time, writing a video game.
Whoa! That's so cool.
That's coming out next year. So, so now it's way different. Like now I'm like on the clock all day. But that was like my routine since like 2020. Up until literally the top of this year.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is. And then if it's something that's really pressing, I might have to put in some work on the weekends or whatever. But I'm just at it. I'm just like, even if I'm only working for 30 minutes, it helps me feel like I'm being productive. You know what I'm saying? So
I mean, because it is productive, right? I was wondering, in the times where you're off, like those 15, 20 minutes, what do you do? Yeah,
I'm like going on walks usually. Like that's really what I do.
So you do a lot of like movement.
Hella walking. I had, again, at that time, I had my like I was in the gym a lot. Now, not so much. But yeah, a lot of movement. Yeah. Like that's what I'm doing. I'm walking. Might go to the courts, like play basketball. Might go to the tennis court. Might just whatever. Might go on a little hike or something. But just a lot of movement and just trying to like, again, just like refresh.
Yeah. I mean, movement is so good for focus and concentration in so many different ways. And it seems like you also are allowing your brain to take a break. Yeah. And letting your body do the rest.
Yeah, because that's another thing like, you can overwork your brain. I will get a migraine in a second because I'm just like...
Yeah, especially if you're hyper-focused on whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah. To me, seems like you're able to know what your limits are. Yeah. And then you give yourself that break so that you can keep working instead of like doing something for 6 hours and then being completely almost catatonic.
Yeah, I couldn't do nothing for 6 hours straight. I'm gonna be honest. I know people do it, but not me.
Yeah. Again, you know your limits, and I think that's amazing because you're able to not burn yourself out.
Yeah.
Which is important for creativity. Yeah.
I agree.
A question that I always ask and kind of like to end on is, what would young Nick think of you today? Yeah. And would he like Promise Boys?
I think he would. Yeah, I think he would definitely like Promise Boys. And I think he'd be proud. You know what I'm saying? I really do. I think he'd be proud. I think he'd be like, okay, like we doing something. You know? Yeah.
Would he be surprised, shocked at the things that you've been able to do and the things that you're working on and things that you want for yourself?
I don't know if he'd be shocked, to be honest. I don't know if he'd be shocked or surprised. It's so funny because I feel like that was a whole different life ago. Like I feel like I feel like those were different people in a weird way. But
I mean, you are.
Yeah. But it's like, or I should say, I feel like I was never a young Nick. Like I feel like the only life I really know is this life. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a weird. I guess that's a memory thing. But I just feel like young Nick is like a thought to me. You know, it's like I don't necessarily remember everything, but I do know that like I always was like kind of different and kind of like big, kind of like dreams, big thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I don't know if he'd be shocked, but definitely I feel like proud and would definitely love Promise Boys for sure. Yeah.
I love that. And I think what you're kind of pointing at is like, because you, to me, seem pretty self-aware and you've known who you are for quite some time, it's difficult to think of a time where you were still trying to figure out certain parts of yourself, because it seems like there's parts of you that are still very much so young Nick in a way. So maybe you're not as separate as you think you are.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I would agree with that.
All right. Well, I think this has been a really inspiring conversation. And I think, to me, to see someone walking in their purpose and feel grounded in it is very inspiring for me as a person. I hope anyone that is in the throes of trying to figure out what purpose means and looks like for them. I'm really excited for everything that you have coming out this year, next year, all the years to come. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Wale. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.